They thought she was just a quiet woman counting magazines in a dusty warehouse. Until a colonel spotted a single faded word that froze him in place. That word was Blue Phantom, the code name of a sniper with 290 confirmed kills, officially declared dead 3 years ago. But if she's alive, why is she hiding here? And what happens when the wrong people find out? This is not just survival, it's the rebirth of a legend. Stick around, because by the end you'll see why her name still terrifies generals today. Make sure you subscribe to A Simple Woman right now and hit the bell, because this story is about to explode. Under the humming fluorescent lights of Fort Harrow's supply depot, the rows of steel shelves stretched like a maze of forgotten war stories. Wooden crates stamped with black numbers sat in endless columns, each one holding magazines and rounds destined for soldiers who would never know the hand that counted them. Among the contractors moving through the aisles, one figure never drew attention. She moved with quiet precision, head bowed, clipboard balanced in her hand, pen scratching neat rows of numbers. To everyone else, she was just another woman doing monotonous inventory work. But her name, Rena Cade, carried a secret that could have shaken the entire base to its core. Every morning began the same way. 6 a.m. sharp, her boots tapped lightly against the concrete floor as she passed through the checkpoint. The guards barely noticed her anymore, so routine was her entry. She signed the log, nodded politely, and disappeared into the depot's cavernous interior. For 8 months, this ritual had been her anchor, the camouflage that hid her from questions she wasn't ready to answer. Each magazine she lifted, inspected, and logged was a heartbeat away from the life she had left behind. A life where her fingers squeezed triggers that altered the course of missions. A life where a whispered codename echoed through classified briefings, Blue Phantom. She told herself she had buried that name the day an Afghan valley swallowed her team. The official reports had declared her killed in action. In truth, she had been evacuated, broken and unconscious, patched together, in a medical ward where no one spoke her real name again. Bureaucrats decided she was more useful as a ghost. They gave her a civilian identity, a contract job, and a warning to disappear into the grey background of military logistics. She obeyed, mostly. On the top corner of her clipboard, half faded beneath smudges of time, and handling the words Blue Phantom still lingered in black ink. Perhaps it was negligence, perhaps defiance, perhaps she wanted someone to remember she had lived. This morning, the air in the depot shifted when footsteps echoed with a cadence that didn't belong to clerks or junior soldiers. Rena heard it before she saw him. The stride of command, steady and deliberate. She continued her count, eyes lowered, but the awareness sharpened every muscle in her body. A voice cut through the warehouse noise. "Excuse me, I need to check something on your inventory sheet." She lifted her gaze slowly and met the eyes of Colonel Nathan Cross. Cross was a man forged in the field, not in offices. His weathered face carried lines carved by long deployments. His eyes were sharp, scanning, taking in details others missed. He reached for the clipboard without ceremony, and Rena passed it over with the same calm face she wore every day. He flipped through the neat handwriting, impressed by the precision, until his gaze landed on the faded stamp. The pen in his hand stopped. His breath shifted. Blue Phantom. He stared longer than necessary, the name dragging him back to whispered legends, missions in Iraq, impossible distances, kills confirmed by intelligence networks, the sniper who never missed. Reports had placed her body among the dead 3 years ago. Yet here she stood, in a grey contractor's uniform, counting ammunition like a clerk. Rena watched him with still eyes, reading every micro-expression. She knew the exact moment he understood. His grip tightened slightly on the board, his lips pressed thin, his silence stretched. In that pause, the air between them thickened. If he spoke the name aloud, half the depot might hear, but he didn't. He closed the folder and handed it back. "Your documentation is thorough," he said, voice low. She took the board without a blink, replying, "Accuracy matters, especially here." A statement layered with more meaning than the casual workers around them could detect. Cross nodded once, studying her like a battlefield map. He had no doubt who she was now. He had sat through those classified briefings. He had seen photographs of ballistic paths impossible to replicate. He had read the redacted reports that whispered of a sniper who redefined the limits of human capability. And yet he had also attended the memorial service. He had believed Blue Phantom was gone. Seeing her alive rattled the foundations of truth he thought he knew. Why was she here? Why had she not been reclaimed by the machine that forged her? And what would happen if her existence leaked beyond this depot? As he turned away, questions stormed his mind. To report her survival would trigger investigations, bureaucracy, and possibly attempts to drag her back into missions she might never escape. To stay silent meant carrying a secret that could compromise security. But Cross had instincts, and his instincts told him the woman in front of him was no threat to his command. She was, however, something rare, a living legend hiding in plain sight. Rena resumed her counting as if nothing had happened, but inside her thoughts shifted. She had always known the faded stamp on her clipboard was a risk. Today proved it. Recognition had arrived sooner than she expected. Cross's eyes had confirmed what she had feared, and half hoped someone finally saw her. She finished logging the last row, but her fingers lingered on the edges of the magazine, memories pressing heavy. She whispered inwardly the words she never allowed past her lips. "Blue Phantom is not dead. Blue Phantom is me." By the time Cross exited the depot, his decision was already forming. He would not expose her, not yet. Instead, he would test her. The military was launching a new advanced marksmanship program at Fort Harrow. They needed someone who understood the difference between theory and survival. Perhaps he had just found the perfect candidate, if she was willing to step out of the shadows she had built around herself. The question was whether Rena Cade wanted to remain a ghost, or whether Blue Phantom was ready to breathe again. The classroom smelled of oil and gunpowder, the faint perfume of steel barrels cleaned one too many times. Rena Cade had not planned to be here. She told herself she had said yes only to keep Colonel Cross satisfied, to buy herself time, to avoid the weight of unwanted attention. Yet now she stood at the front of a firing range classroom, rows of recruits staring. Back at her, each wearing the same expectant expression, "Prove yourself." She had almost forgotten what that felt like. Colonel Cross had introduced her briefly. "This is Miss Cade. She's here to evaluate your handling during this trial session." He didn't mention her past. He didn't need to. His eyes locked with hers as if to remind her, "Your choice." Rena nodded once, the gesture of someone stepping across an invisible line. 12 recruits sat in the room, each holding rifles they thought they understood. At the far end of the row was Ava Morales, younger than most, her brown hair tied back messily, eyes sharp but impatient, like someone who wanted to prove herself faster than the world allowed. Rena recognized that fire instantly. She had once carried it herself. Fire like that could win battles or end lives too soon. "All right," Rena said, her voice even. "Show me how you breathe." A few recruits glanced at each other, uncertain. "Every marksman thinks about aim, but breathing tells me who you are under pressure." She paced slowly along the line as each student settled behind a practice rifle, exhaling, squeezing triggers into empty chambers. The sound of clicks echoed. Rena read the tension in their shoulders, the rhythm of their chest rising and falling. She saw every mistake before it happened. When she reached Ava, she paused. The girl's hands gripped too tight, her shoulders locked as if she could force the bullet into obedience. "Loosen your grip," Rena said softly. Ava shot her a look that was half defiance, half curiosity. "I know what I'm doing," she muttered. Rena crouched beside her, eyes never leaving the target 300 meters downrange. If you knew, you'd already be on target. She pressed 2 fingers against Ava's elbow, guiding the angle by fractions of degrees. Ava scoffed, but when she exhaled and squeezed, the shot rang, and the bullet struck closer to center than any of her previous attempts. Surprise flashed across her face before she covered it with a smirk. The other recruits noticed. They watched this quiet instructor with new attention. Rena's movements were small, efficient, carrying an authority none of them could name. She moved down the line, adjusting postures, offering corrections in clipped sentences. With each shot fired, she read not only their aim, but their discipline. She could tell who would survive a battlefield and who was still chasing the idea of glory. Halfway through the session, the wind outside shifted. The long-range target flags fluttered erratically. Rena's eyes narrowed. The recruits prepared to shoot again, oblivious to the subtle change. She stepped forward quickly. "Stop! You'll miss every shot!" Confusion spread across the line. "What wind?" "It's nothing," one of them said. Rena grabbed a piece of chalk and drew numbers on the whiteboard with rapid strokes, calculating speed and angle. Crosswind at 2 o'clock, 11 miles per hour. At 500 meters, that drifts you 6 inches right. Adjust your sights. Her voice carried no doubt, only certainty. Some hesitated, skeptical. Ava, biting her lip, twisted her sight anyway and pulled the trigger. The bullet smacked the center ring dead on. Gasps rippled. Rena didn't smile. She simply nodded. Accuracy isn't luck, it's discipline. Colonel Cross watched from the corner, arms folded. He had planned this as a test, whether she would reveal anything at all. Now he saw the truth. The recruits didn't understand the magnitude of what they had witnessed, but he did. No contractor should have been able to read wind like that, no civilian. Should have known how to turn chaos into precision without instruments. That was the instinct of someone who had lived behind a scope for years. Blue Phantom was bleeding through the cracks of her disguise. The session ended with recruits buzzing, whispering to each other about the strange new instructor. Some were impressed, others unnerved. Ava lingered, pretending to adjust her rifle longer than necessary. Finally, she approached Rena as the others filed out. "You've done this before," she said bluntly. Rena met her gaze, silent. Ava tilted her head, pushing further. "You don't move like a civilian. You move like someone who's been shot at." The words hit harder than they should have. Rena tightened her jaw. "What I've done doesn't matter. What you do now does. Learn discipline or you'll be a liability." She turned away, ending the conversation. But Ava's eyes stayed locked on her back, hungry for answers. That night in her apartment, Rena replayed the day's events. She had meant to remain invisible, yet she had given herself away with every correction, every instinctive calculation. Cross had seen too much. Ava had suspected too much. The mask she had worn for 8 months was cracking. She poured a glass of water, sat in silence, and admitted to herself the truth. Hiding was no longer sustainable. She had stepped back into the line of sight, and once that happened, there was no retreat. The morning sun painted the range in pale gold as the recruits prepared for their live fire exercise. The line of shooters stretched across the gravel, rifles set on bipods, targets waiting far downrange. Safety officers walked behind them, checking gear, reminding them of procedure. To the recruits it was another test. But to Rena Cade, it was a storm waiting to break. She had already seen the warning signs in Ava Morales, the eagerness, the recklessness, the refusal to slow down. Fire without control was dangerous. Today, that danger would surface. Colonel Cross observed quietly from a shaded platform, his expression unreadable. Rena stood near the line, arms folded, eyes scanning like a hawk. She could see every detail, the way one recruit's shoulders trembled, the way another overcompensated on his scope, the restless tapping of Ava's boot. When the signal came, rifles cracked in unison, thunder rolling across the range. Dust and brass flew. Most bullets struck somewhere on target, but Ava's impatience betrayed her. She adjusted too quickly, trying to outrun the wind. Her barrel angled dangerously close to the recruit beside her. Rena's instincts flared. Time slowed, the way it always had when life dangled by a thread. She saw the trigger tightening under Ava's finger, the oblivious recruit next to her shifting into line of fire. In one swift motion, Rena grabbed a nearby rifle from its stand, dropped to a knee, and fired. Her bullet snapped through the steel wire, holding the target's silhouette upright. The silhouette collapsed instantly, yanking Ava's aim downward a fraction of a second before her shot broke. The round screamed into dirt instead of flesh. The range fell silent, stunned by the chain of events no one fully understood. Ava froze, her hands trembling. The recruit next to her realized what had almost happened, his face blanching. The safety officers rushed forward, demanding explanations. Cross stood rigid, eyes locked on Rena. Only she had moved fast enough, precise enough to prevent tragedy. Her action was no lucky guess. It was the reflex of a sniper whose body remembered everything, even after years in hiding. Rena stood slowly, returning the rifle to its stand, her voice cut through the panic with chilling calm. Discipline saves lives. Impulse costs them. The recruits stared, wide-eyed, realizing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Ava ripped off her ear protection, fury in her voice. "You made me look like a fool." Rena met her glare without flinching. "No, you almost made yourself a killer. Learn the difference." The range officers scrambled to restore order, muttering about safety violations and near misses. Cross stepped forward, dismissing their chatter with a single hand. His gaze lingered on Rena. She didn't look back, but she knew the conclusion forming in his mind. Ghosts didn't stay buried forever. Blue Phantom had revealed herself again, if only for a heartbeat. Later, when the recruits filed out, their whispers followed her. They replayed the impossible shot, debating how she had seen the danger, how she had reacted faster than anyone could comprehend. Some whispered admiration, others whispered fear. Rena ignored them all. She packed away her clipboard, her face as impassive as stone, but inside she felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. She had crossed another line. Secrets never survived moments like this. Ava lingered after dismissal, her pride bruised but her curiosity burning hotter. She confronted Rena near the racks, voice sharp. "How did you do that? No one else even saw it." Rena's reply was cold steel. "Experience and discipline, two things you lack." Ava clenched her fists, fighting the sting. "You think you're better than us?" Rena leaned in just enough for her words to cut. "I know what happens to shooters who think like you. I've buried enough of them." The younger woman faltered, eyes widening at the raw truth in her tone. That night, Rena sat in her dim apartment, replaying the scene in her mind. She could still hear the crack of her shot, feel the rifle settle against her shoulder, taste the bitter reminder that her instincts were never gone. She had saved a life, yes, but she had also exposed herself again. The recruits would talk, the officers would talk, and Colonel Cross would not stay silent forever. Somewhere in the shadows, Rena could feel the shift, like predators stirring, because they had caught the scent of something thought extinct. Blue Phantom had flickered into view, and predators always hunted legends. The storm came quietly, like most threats in Rena Cade's life. It began with a malfunction that wasn't really a malfunction at all. The electronic lock on the supply depot's storage cage flickered red, then green, then failed entirely. A crate of ammunition appeared on the log, though no one recalled signing it in. The numbers didn't add up, and for someone like Rena, numbers always told the truth. She ran her hand across the crate, eyes narrowing at the faint logo etched beneath the paint. It wasn't standard issue. It was a calling card, subtle, deliberate, meant for her to see. That evening, Colonel Cross summoned her. He leaned over his desk, the lamp casting deep shadows across his face. "There are whispers," he said, "the kind you don't ignore. Someone high is asking questions about you, not about Miss Cade the contractor, about Blue Phantom." He didn't need to say more. Rena's jaw tightened. "Then the cover is broken," she said flatly. Cross nodded. "General Alden Voss. He's not a man who plays by the same rules I do. He has his own resources. Private, off the record. The name was enough. Voss was infamous in certain circles. Powerful, pragmatic, willing to use any means to achieve results. If he knew she was alive, it meant only two outcomes, recruitment or elimination. And if he had already moved pieces inside the depot, she was running out of time. 2 nights later, the invitation came. A plain envelope slid under her apartment door. Inside, a typed note, Hangar 6. Midnight, come alone. Beneath it, a single line in bold. You don't want others to find out, do you? She considered ignoring it. But ignoring General Voss was never an option. The hangar was a cavern of echoes, abandoned aircraft hulks rusting in the corners. Rena entered with the deliberate calm of someone who expected an ambush. She carried no weapon. It would have been pointless. A slow clap echoed from the shadows, and then he appeared. General Alden Voss. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform pristine, eyes like polished steel. Beside him stood men in dark tactical gear, operatives too well equipped to be ordinary soldiers. She recognized the insignia stitched onto their shoulders, Black Summit. A private military company whispered about in hushed tones, the kind of men who handled problems governments couldn't admit existed. "Ms. Cade," Voss greeted, his voice smooth, almost cordial, or should I say, Blue Phantom, you've been hiding in plain sight. Clever, but ghosts can't stay hidden forever. Rena didn't flinch. If you know that name, you know what happened to the last men who tried to own it. Voss smiled thinly. "Oh, I know your record. 290 confirmed kills. Some say more. You're a legend, Miss Cade, and legends belong to those who can use them. I have a mission. It requires a phantom. You'll do it, or you'll vanish again. This time for good." The Black Summit operatives shifted slightly, their presence a silent punctuation. Rena's pulse steadied, her mind mapping exits, distances, angles. She wasn't ready for a firefight tonight, but she also wasn't ready to surrender. "I'm done with missions," she said, her tone like stone. "Find another weapon." Voss's expression hardened. "You misunderstand. This isn't a request. You either serve or you're erased. And if I were you, I'd consider those recruits you've taken under your wing. One in particular, Morales, isn't it? Spirited girl. Shame if her story ended before it began. The words cut deeper than any bullet. Reina's mask didn't slip, but inside her fury ignited. He knew about Ava. He had already marked her. Voss stepped closer, lowering his voice. Think carefully, Blue Phantom. You want to protect them? Then you'll take my offer. Otherwise, Black Summit will ensure you're nothing more than the ghost you pretend to be. Reina said nothing. She turned on her heel, walking out without permission. Every step echoed like a countdown. She had faced enemy commanders, insurgent leaders, assassins in the field, but this was different. This was betrayal blooming inside her own house. General Voss wasn't just a threat to her life. He was a threat to the fragile purpose she had begun to rebuild. Outside, the night air bit cold against her skin. She knew the truth now. Her secret had become leverage, and leverage always came with a price. The week after her encounter with General Voss, Reina Cade lived with a gnawing certainty Black Summit wouldn't wait long. Predators moved fast once they marked prey. She kept her composure on the surface, teaching, correcting, guiding recruits with her usual precision, but beneath that calm, her senses sharpened, scanning every shadow, listening for every anomaly. It was during a routine morning drill that she noticed the first sign. Ava Morales walked briskly across the range, her gear pack bouncing on her shoulders. The girl's defiance was still there, but her movement seemed heavier, more distracted. When she set the pack down, Reina's eyes caught a faint metallic glint stitched near the seam. At first glance it looked like a broken zipper pull, but her instincts screamed otherwise. During the break, Reina moved silently behind the benches, crouched beside Ava's pack, and ran her fingers along the fabric. She found it, a wafer-thin device no bigger than a coin, tucked discreetly under the stitching. A tracker, not military issue, not base standard, Black Summit. Her jaw tightened. They hadn't just found Ava, they had tagged her like quarry in a hunt. She pressed the device flat in her palm, weighing her choices. Destroying it would alert them too soon. Leaving it meant Ava remained bait. Either way, the game had shifted. Reina tucked the tracker back into place, covering her tracks. Ava returned moments later, oblivious, her voice cocky as ever. "What are you staring at?" she asked. Reina forced her tone into neutrality. "Your posture's sloppy. Fix it." Ava rolled her eyes but adjusted, never guessing her life now hung in balance. That evening, Reina met Master Sergeant Theo Park in a dim corridor near the armory. She showed him the tracker, her eyes cold. Black Summit planted it. On her. Park's brow furrowed, his voice low. "Then she's the pressure point. They'll move on her to get to you." Reina nodded. "They're preparing a snatch, likely during a training session. Too much chaos for anyone to stop it in time." Park hesitated, then asked the question no one wanted spoken aloud. "Why her?" Reina exhaled slowly. "Because they know I care." Voss made it clear. Park's expression hardened. "So, what's the play?" A rare spark lit Reina's eyes. "We set a counter-ambush, let them think they're hunting. Then we close the jaws." The next day, Reina observed Ava more closely than ever. The girl still carried herself with reckless bravado, cracking jokes, pushing herself harder than her peers. But now every movement was under a cloud Reina could not explain to her. She wanted to pull the girl aside, to confess the danger, but that would only make Ava panic, or worse, resist. Discipline would have to be enforced another way. Reina's plan unfolded quietly. She slipped into the maintenance bay late at night, where the depot's equipment logs were stored. With Park's help, she rigged the range's surveillance feeds to loop decoy footage, and planted their own hidden lenses in angles Black Summit wouldn't anticipate. If the mercenaries tried to grab Ava, their every move would be recorded. Evidence of Voss's hand undeniable. But that was only half the trap. 2 nights later, Rayna led Ava into an empty drill hall under the guise of a special test. While Ava fumbled with her scope settings, Rayna carefully removed the tracker from her pack and swapped it into a decoy identical in size and weight. The decoy would be carried by one of Park's men, disguised as a recruit, positioned where Rayna wanted Black Summit to strike. Ava frowned. "Why the sudden attention?" she asked. Rayna kept her voice cold, masking the truth with sharpness. "Because you still don't understand what discipline means. And until you do, you're everyone's liability." Ava glared, stung but silent. She didn't know those words weren't punishment. They were protection. As Ava stormed off, Rayna stayed behind, staring at the small decoy pack now buzzing with the faint pulse of the tracker. Somewhere beyond the base perimeter, mercenaries were watching a signal they thought belonged to an impulsive recruit. They believed they were closing in. They had no idea the phantom they sought had already prepared the battlefield. For the first time since Afghanistan, Rayna felt the old focus settle over her. Her cover was burned. Her name was a target again. But if Black Summit wanted to drag her back into the shadows, they would learn the truth the hard way. Blue Phantom did not run. Blue Phantom hunted. Fort Harrow never slept, but after midnight its corridors took on a hush that felt conspiratorial. Rayna Cade walked those halls with Colonel Cross at her side, the echo of their boots mingling with the low hum of fluorescent lights. Between them hung the unspoken truth: Black Summit was coming. They had marked Ava Morales. They had already crossed into the perimeter once. The next attempt would not be subtle. Cross stopped in front of a secured briefing room. He swiped his card, ushering Rayna inside, and locked the door behind them. The walls were bare, the table cold steel, the air heavy with secrecy. On the tabletop lay schematics of the training range, lines of red ink scrawled across maps and surveillance grids. "This is the cage," Cross said, tapping a section of the map with his finger. "If they want her, they'll strike here. Big enough for chaos, isolated enough for deniability. We give them a chance to bite, then we snap it shut." Rayna studied the map, her eyes narrowing as she traced angles and blind spots. "Their surveillance is better than you think. They'll know if the base's feeds are tampered with." Cross's reply came with a thin smile. "Which is why you and Park rigged the decoy pack. They'll follow the tracker. What they won't know is that we've spliced our own cameras into the range. Everything they do will be captured in real time on encrypted channels. When they move, we'll have their faces and their orders." Rayna leaned closer, pointing to a narrow service tunnel that cut beneath the bleachers. "They'll use this. It gives them cover on approach and a quick exit." Cross nodded. "We'll seal the other end, force them into a choke point." Silence stretched for a moment, heavy with the reality of what they were planning. This wasn't just protection. This was entrapment, an operation to expose one of the most dangerous private military groups working under U.S. Command's own shadow. Rayna's voice dropped. "What happens when we prove it? Voss won't fall quietly. He'll bury this before anyone above him sees the truth." Cross met her gaze. "Then we make sure too many eyes are watching. We send the feed not just to base command, but to 3 different oversight channels. Even if one gets buried, another survives. It was risky, reckless even, but necessary." Rayna allowed herself a faint nod. "Then it's a cage, and I'm the bait they don't know they're hunting." The following day was a blur of preparation. Park's team planted micro-cameras disguised as maintenance bolts along the range's perimeter. Cables snaked into junction boxes, feeding encrypted streams to Cross's hidden command room. Rena oversaw every angle, correcting placements with the cold precision of someone who had designed kill zones before. She insisted on details others overlooked. The height of a railing, the way wind shifted through gaps, the reflection of moonlight on a scope lens. Every variable mattered. Ava remained oblivious, her decoy pack transmitting a steady signal that pulsed like a heartbeat on Black Summit's receivers. Rena watched her from a distance, the weight of silence pressing on her chest. She wanted to warn the girl, to confess the scale of what was unfolding around her, but discipline demanded otherwise. Too much knowledge would compromise everything. That night, as the final cables were secured, Cross approached her on the range. His voice was low, his words deliberate. "You don't have to be here when they strike. Park and I can handle it." Rena's response came sharp. "You'll need someone who knows how these men think. I've faced their kind before. They're not soldiers, they're predators. And predators don't walk into cages, they have to be led." Cross studied her face, seeing the steel in her eyes. He didn't argue further. "Then lead them," he said. As the range lights dimmed and the night stretched heavy across Fort Harrow, Rena stood on the platform overlooking the silent targets. For months she had hidden behind crates and clipboards, counting magazines like a shadow of herself. Now the pretense was over. Blue Phantom was awake again, not because she sought the fight, but because the fight had come for those under her protection. In the darkness, the cage was ready. Cameras watched unseen, exits were sealed. The tracker pulsed in the decoy pack like a lure, glimmering in black water. Black Summit believed they were hunting. They would soon learn the truth. The night was too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as Fort Harrow's training range lay under the silver glow of floodlights. From the tower above, Rena Cade scanned the dark horizon through a pair of night optics. Every instinct told her it was coming, the moment when Black Summit would try to take what wasn't theirs. She could almost feel them out there in the black, circling like wolves that thought they'd found an opening. Below her, a handful of recruits, including Ava Morales, moved into position for what was framed as a midnight drill. Most had no idea this was anything but training. Only Park and Cross knew the truth. The decoy pack carrying the tracker was strapped to the shoulders of a disguised soldier posing as Ava, stationed near the edge of the range. The real Ava was kept back, restless, annoyed that she had been ordered to stand down. She didn't know that tonight she wasn't the student, she was the prize. Rena's voice carried over the radio with calm precision. "All units, hold positions. Watch the tunnel." Her eyes never blinked as she tracked the faint glow of a service tunnel entrance beneath the bleachers. She had predicted the route, and predators rarely disappointed. The first shadow emerged at 0100 hours. Black Summit operatives dressed in matte black, their gear customized beyond standard military issue. They moved with lethal coordination, silent and efficient, their rifles fitted with suppressors, their visors reflecting faint starlight. Rena counted 6, then 8, then 10, a full assault team. "Targets acquired," she whispered. Cross's voice answered in her earpiece. "Let them bite the hook." The operatives slithered toward the decoy. The pack's tracker blinked faintly inside, luring them deeper. One mercenary raised a hand, signaling the group to fan out. They had no idea their every move was being streamed to 3 separate encrypted channels outside Fort Harrow. Their arrogance blinded them. At 50 meters, one mercenary knelt, rifle raised, covering the approach. Another advanced on the decoy Ava, blade drawn. The soldier wearing the pack tensed, waiting for the signal. But the strike came sooner than expected. The mercenary lunged, dragging the decoy to the ground. That was the trigger. "Now," Rena ordered. Floodlights blazed alive, blinding the intruders. Sirens wailed. Cross's men surged from cover, but Black Summit didn't break. They turned with ruthless precision, firing suppressed rounds that cracked through the air. The range erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes splitting the night. Rena dropped behind her rifle, the familiar weight fitting against her shoulder as if no time had passed since the valley in Afghanistan. Her scope painted the field in shades of green and red. She tracked one mercenary sprinting toward Ava's position, crosshairs steady even as adrenaline surged. She exhaled once, squeezed, and the man folded silently into the gravel. Another swung his weapon toward Park's flank. Rena adjusted, her body reacting faster than thought. The shot slammed into his shoulder, spinning him away. Every bullet she fired was a message: Blue Phantom is alive. But the mercenaries pressed harder, realizing their deception. The decoy wasn't Ava. They split, half retreating toward the tunnel, half surging deeper toward the recruits. Rena tracked their leader, a tall figure moving with chilling confidence. His rifle barked, scattering the younger soldiers. He wasn't here just to snatch, he was here to kill witnesses. Ava, against orders, broke cover. She scrambled toward a downed recruit, dragging him behind a barrier as rounds tore the dirt around her. Rena's heart clenched. This was exactly what Voss wanted, to expose her through the girl. She sighted the leader, but he ducked behind steel plating, clever and fast. The battle tightened into a brutal chess match. Every shot Rena fired bought seconds. Every second mattered. Cross's men pinned 2 mercenaries, but more poured from the tunnel. The cage was holding, but only just. Then the moment came. A mercenary broke past the line, sprinting straight at Ava with a stun baton in hand. Rena swung her scope, but the angle was blocked by debris. Her pulse pounded, too late, unless she trusted someone else. "Ava!" she shouted over the comms, her voice cutting like a blade. "Sight left, breathe, squeeze!" Ava dropped prone, her rifle trembling in her hands. She exhaled, adjusted instinctively just as Rena had taught, and fired. The mercenary collapsed 2 strides from her. The silence that followed lasted only a second, but it was enough. Ava stared at the smoking barrel, eyes wide. She had just taken her first life. Rena's chest tightened. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But survival gave no choices. The mercenaries faltered, realizing the trap was closing. Rena seized the opening. Her final shot shattered the leader's weapon, sending sparks into the night. Park's team tackled him down, securing restraints. The rest scattered, but the cage snapped shut. Every angle covered, every exit sealed. When the dust settled, the range was littered with spent casings, broken gear, and silence heavy with realization. Cross strode across the gravel, his men dragging captured operatives into the floodlight. Evidence streamed across the secure channels, undeniable proof of Voss's involvement. But the true twist was yet to come. Ava staggered toward Rena, still trembling, her face pale. "Why? Why did he know my name?" she whispered. "That man," he said Morales, like he knew me. Rena swallowed hard. She had dreaded this moment. "Because he did," she said quietly. "You deserve the truth." Cross watched silently as Rena placed a steady hand on Ava's shoulder. 3 years ago, in Afghanistan, I wasn't alone. I had a spotter, the best partner I ever had. His name was Miguel Morales. He was your father." Ava's breath hitched, her eyes filling with shock. "My father? You were there when—" Rena nodded. "He died covering me. I carried him out as far as I could, but we were overrun. They declared us both dead. The world buried Blue Phantom. But I lived, and because of him, so did I." Ava shook her head, struggling to process. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because your father wanted you safe. He made me promise, if anything happened, I'd protect you. That's why Voss came after you. He knew your bloodline. He knew what you meant to me. You weren't just leverage, you were his way to break me." Tears blurred Ava's vision, but in them burned a fire Rena recognized, the fire of legacy, sharpened by truth. Cross broke the silence. "We've got Voss cornered now. These men, the footage, it's enough to bring him down." But Rena knew the fight wasn't finished. Voss still sat in his office, cloaked by power and politics. Yet tonight he had overplayed his hand. His mercenaries had failed. His secret was exposed, and his ghost had come back to life. As dawn crept over Fort Harrow, Rena stood with her rifle slung across her shoulder, Ava at her side. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a shadow. Blue Phantom had returned, not as a weapon in someone else's war, but as a guardian. And as long as she breathed, no one would take that from her again. The aftermath of the battle stretched into the dawn hours. Fort Harrow's range was sealed, evidence secured, and the captured operatives processed under heavy guard. Colonel Cross stood in the command room with feeds transmitting to oversight channels far above their clearance. The faces of Black Summit's mercenaries glowed on screens, their orders traceable. Their chain of command leading straight to General Alden Voss. There would be hearings, there would be denials, but there was no longer any hiding. Voss had been caught using ghosts to wage private wars, and his empire of silence was about to collapse. For Rena Cade, victory felt less like triumph and more like exhale. She walked the range littered with brass and bloodstains, the dawn light glinting off her rifle. Ava Morales walked beside her, head bowed, the weight of last night pressing into her young shoulders. She had killed for the first time. Nothing Cross or Park could say would erase that truth. But Rena knew she couldn't let Ava drown in guilt. She owed her more than that. They stopped at the edge of the range, where the gravel met the grass. Rena placed her rifle down and turned to face her. "Your father once told me something," she said, voice low. "He said a sniper's job isn't about ending lives. It's about protecting the ones behind you. Every shot is a promise that someone else goes home." Ava's eyes glistened. "Is that what last night was? Protecting?" "Yes," Rena answered firmly. "You saved someone. You proved you can be disciplined. That's what your father would have wanted, and that's what I'll teach you, if you're ready." The girl nodded slowly, her defiance tempered, reshaped into resolve. Rena saw Miguel's fire in her eyes, but now it had edges of control. Legacy was a dangerous gift. It could destroy or it could build. For Ava, it would be forged into purpose. Later, in a quiet ceremony attended only by those who understood, Rena handed over the decoy pack that had lured Black Summit into their cage. On it, she had affixed a small brass plate engraved with 3 words: accuracy, discipline, mercy. It was the motto of a new program, one she would build not for war, but for survival. Colonel Cross clasped her hand with a rare smile. "You've given them more than training. You've given them someone to follow." Rena's gaze drifted back to Ava, who stood among the recruits with a steadiness beyond her years. She realized then that her legacy was no longer measured in the impossible shots whispered about in classified briefings. It was measured in the lives carried forward, the knowledge passed down, the recruits who would one day save others because of what she had taught. Blue Phantom would remain a ghost on paper, a casualty in the archives. But Rena Cade had become something greater, a mentor, a guardian, the bridge between past and future. As the sun climbed higher, she picked up her rifle one last time, slung it across her shoulder, and walked toward the range. Ava followed, step for step. The legend had been reborn not in the shadows of war, but in the light of legacy. And so the woman they once dismissed as a quiet clerk in a warehouse proved that some ghosts cannot be buried. Rena Cade did not return to the battlefield for glory or revenge. She returned to keep a promise, to pass on discipline and purpose, and to protect those who would one day stand where she once stood. Blue Phantom remained a name etched in secret files, but the legacy of what she taught was no secret at all. It lived on in every soldier she trained and in every life they would one day save. Thank you for staying with us through this story. If you felt the weight of Rena's journey, please make sure to subscribe to A Simple Woman's Stories and ring the bell so you never miss the next tale. I'd love to hear what you think. Should Rena remain a hidden legend, or should her true story be known to the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and when you're done, don't leave just yet. There are more stories waiting for you. Click through the videos on screen now to continue exploring the hidden legacies of women who changed everything when no one expected them to.